Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning, we'll be in Genesis chapter 39, verse 1 through chapter 41, verse 16. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt. An Egyptian named Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh, and the captain of the guard purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. The Lord was with Joseph. He was successful and lived in the household of his Egyptian master. His master observed that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made everything he was doing successful. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal attendant. Potiphar appointed Joseph overseer of his household and put him in charge of everything he owned. From the time Potiphar appointed him over his household and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on everything that he had, both in his house and in his fields. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. He gave no thought to anything except for the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and good-looking. Soon after these things, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Have sex with me." But he refused, saying to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not give any thought to his household with me here, and everything that he owns he has put into my care. There is no one greater in this household than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do such a great evil and sin against God?" Even though she continued to speak to Joseph day after day, he did not respond to her invitation to have sex with her. One day he went into the house to do his work, when none of the household servants were there in the house. She grabbed him by his outer garment, saying, "Have sex with me." But he left his outer garment in her hand and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his outer garment in her hand and had run outside, she called for her household servants and said to them, "See, my husband brought in a Hebrew man to us to humiliate us. He tried to have sex with me, but I screamed loudly. When he heard me raise my voice and scream, he left his outer garment beside me and ran outside." So she laid his outer garment beside her until his master came home. This is what she said to him: "That Hebrew slave you brought to us tried to humiliate me, but when I raised my voice and screamed, he left his outer garment and ran outside." When his master heard his wife say, "This is the way your slave treated me," he became furious. Joseph's master took him and threw him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. So he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him kindness. He granted him favor in the sight of the prison warden. The warden put all the prisoners under Joseph's care. He was in charge of whatever they were doing. The warden did not concern himself with anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he was doing, the Lord was making successful. After these things happened, the cupbearer to the king of Egypt and the royal baker offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was enraged with his two officials, the cupbearer and the baker, so he imprisoned them in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same facility where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be their attendant, and he served them. They spent some time in custody, both of them, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream the same night. Each man's dream had its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were looking depressed. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were with him in custody in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" They told him, "We both had dreams, but there is no one to interpret them." Joseph responded, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph. "In my dream there was a vine in front of me. On the vine there were 3 branches. As it budded, its blossoms opened, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes, squeezed them into his cup, and put the cup in Pharaoh's hand." "This is its meaning," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches represent 3 days. In 3 more days, Pharaoh will reinstate you and restore you to your office. You will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you did before when you were cupbearer. But remember me when it goes well for you, and show me kindness. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and bring me out of this prison. For I really was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing wrong here for which they should put me in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation of the first dream was favorable, he said to Joseph, "I also appeared in my dream, and there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the top basket there were baked goods of every kind for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them from the basket that was on my head. Joseph replied, This is its meaning. The 3 baskets represent 3 days. In 3 more days, Pharaoh will decapitate you and impale you on a pole. Then the birds will eat your flesh from you. On the 3rd day it was Pharaoh's birthday, so he gave a feast for all his servants. He lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker in the midst of his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his former position, so that he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But the chief baker he impaled, just as Joseph had predicted. But the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. At the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh had a dream as he was standing by the Nile. 7 fine-looking, fat cows were coming up out of the Nile, and they grazed in the reeds. Then 7 bad-looking, thin cows were coming up after them from the Nile, and they stood beside the other cows at the edge of the river. The bad-looking, thin cows ate the 7 fine-looking, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. Then he fell asleep again and had a second dream. There were 7 heads of grain growing on one stalk, healthy and good. Then 7 heads of grain, thin and burned by the east wind, were sprouting up after them. The thin heads swallowed up the 7 healthy and full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up and realized it was a dream. In the morning he was troubled, so he called for all the diviner priests of Egypt and all his wise men. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, Today I recall my failures. Pharaoh was enraged with his servants, and he put me in prison in the house of the captain of the guards, me and the chief baker. We each had a dream one night. Each one of us had a dream with its own meaning. Now a young man, a Hebrew, a servant of the captain of the guards, was with us there. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted the meaning of each of our respective dreams for us. It happened just as he had said to us. Pharaoh restored me to my office, but he impaled the baker. Yes. Then Pharaoh summoned Joseph, so they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. He shaved himself, changed his clothes, and came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and there's no one who can interpret it, but I have heard about you that you can interpret dreams. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, It is not within my power, but God will speak concerning the welfare of Pharaoh. Okay. So you have the start of Joseph's captivity, Joseph's story in Egypt. From slavery in Potiphar's house, he was given command over all of Potiphar's house. Then subsequently, his Potiphar's wife screwed that up pretty good. And then Joseph was imprisoned and given authority over the prison. Subsequently, you have these 2 royal officials, the cupbearer and the baker, who both have dreams that Joseph interprets correctly. And then you have Pharaoh having a dream. So I think this is why it's important, why the emphasis is made, like in the New Testament, for slaves to obey their masters, kind of thing. Because just as Pharaoh was noticed by his master Potiphar, with how much God blessed him in what he was doing, so too God will notice, even those who are contemporarily involved in slavery, but even beyond that, employers and employees should work with all their hearts as if working for the Lord and not for men, kind of thing. And then That's not to say that slavery is good. It's just how the a slave should act. That is, doing everything for the glory of God. Just as we all should act that way. Well, don't have too much more here. So, Matthew 12, verse 46 through chapter 13, verse 23. While Jesus was still speaking to the crowds, his mother and his brothers came and stood outside, asking to speak to him. Someone told him, "Look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." To the one who had said this, Jesus replied, "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?" And pointing toward his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." On that day, after Jesus went out of the house, he sat by the lake. And such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat to sit while the whole crowd stood on the shore. He told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil. They sprang up quickly because the soil was not deep. But when the sun came up, they were scorched, and because they did not have sufficient root, they withered. Other seed fell among the thorns, and they grew up and choked them. But other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100 times as much, some 60, and some 30. The one who has ears had better listen." Then the disciples came to him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He replied, "You have been given the opportunity to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but they have not. For whoever has will be given more, and will have in abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. For this reason I speak to them in parables. Although they see, they do not see. And although they hear, they do not hear, nor do they understand. And concerning them, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled that says, 'You will listen carefully, yet you will never understand. You will look closely, yet you will never comprehend. For the heart of this people has become dull. They are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes, so that they would not see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts in turn, and I would heal them. But your eyes are blessed because they see, and your ears because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. So listen to the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed sown on rocky ground is the person who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. But he has no root in himself and does not endure. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, immediately he falls away. The seed sown among thorns is the person who hears the word, but worldly cares and the seductiveness of wealth choke the word, so it produces nothing. But as for the seed sown on good soil, this is the person who hears the word and understands it. He bears fruit, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Yeah. So at the start there in the end of Matthew chapter 12, you have Jesus' mother and brothers coming to speak with him. And in a different gospel, it reveals the reason being that they didn't think he was sane, essentially, and were coming to pluck him out from the crowds and give him a thing or two. But Jesus here, I think, going back to the Sermon on the Mount when he says that I did not come to bring peace but bring a sword, and that a man's enemies will be the members of his own household, kind of thing. Rather than choosing the familial relations, he said, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" He pointed towards his disciples and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." That is a greater priority put in those who actually follow God and listen to what he's saying. And then you have the parable of the sower here, where he talks about the various effects of the spoken word in people's lives and how they respond to it or don't respond to it, with the explanation provided at the end. Yeah. In verses 19 through 23 of chapter 13. Yeah. I've heard interesting sermons about this passage, so. Carrying on, Psalm chapter 17, verses 1 through 15. Lord, consider my just cause. Pay attention to my cry for help. Listen to the prayer I sincerely offer. Make a just decision on my behalf. Decide what is right. You have scrutinized my inner motives. You have examined me during the night. You have carefully evaluated me, but you find no sin. I am determined I will say nothing sinful. As for the actions of people, just as you have commanded, I have not followed in the footsteps of violent men. I carefully obey your commands. I do not deviate from them. I call to you, for you will answer me. O God, listen to me. Hear what I say. Accomplish awesome, faithful deeds. You who powerfully deliver those who look to you for protection from their enemies. Protect me as you would protect the pupil of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings. Protect me from the wicked men who attack me, my enemies who crowd around me for the kill. They are calloused. They speak arrogantly. They attack me. Now they surround me. They intend to throw me to the ground. He is like a lion that wants to tear its prey to bits, like a young lion crouching in hidden places. Rise up, Lord, confront him, knock him down, use your sword to rescue me from the wicked man. Lord, use your power to deliver me from these murderers, from the murderers of this world. They enjoy prosperity. You overwhelm them with the riches they desire. They have many children, and leave their wealth to their offspring. As for me, because I am innocent, I will see your face. When I awake, you will reveal yourself to me. And finally, Proverbs chapter 3, verses 33 through 35. The Lord's curse is on the household of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. Although he is scornful to arrogant scoffers, yet he shows favor to the humble. The wise inherit honor, but he holds fools up to public contempt. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.